The Saints wrap up day 4 of training camp in Metairie. That's Brooke Kirchhofer. I'm Ricardo LeCompte. We heard from former Pro Bowl tight end Jimmy Graham on Saturday. That was kind of the big headline and the big story of him. He actually, for the first time in a while, we got to hear from him since he signed on Tuesday. Talked about a variety of things, about his role, about his year that he took off, and most importantly, something he hasn't really chatted about was being traded in 2015 and how that whole situation came out. I want to just kind of get your thoughts on what stood out from that Jimmy Graham press conference that we had.
To me, it felt like he needed to get a lot of things off his chest. He was not able to verbalize what happened, what went on. He even mentioned maybe a little bit of immaturity back in 2015. He did not do any media, I believe, in Green Bay and then Seattle. So for him to get out and stand in front of us, number one, that's what surprised me, that he wanted to get ahead of it and he wanted to talk about it. He was upset. He was upset that he was traded. He was also upset with the narrative that people thought it was about money. The only thing it was for him, and he clarified that with us, whether you believe it or not, he said he just didn't want to be franchise tagged. Outside of that, he wanted to stay in New Orleans, and for him, that's why he actually took the year off from the NFL, because he knew this was a possibility and he only wanted to be in New Orleans. So I think Jimmy Graham is going to work out here. I think it's going to work this season. He obviously is in game shape. I believe that. He said he's in the best cardio shape of his life. He really got to work on his body after sustaining a knee injury early on in his career. And you're going to be able to hear all of Jimmy Graham later on in Sports Tonight at 5, 6, and 10. So be sure to tune into that to hear a very emotional Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, the big thing that kind of stood out was that maturity in terms of just kind of like processing everything that's happened. Remember, as you just mentioned, he didn't talk about most of this stuff. This is kind of the first time when we asked him about the trade stuff that happened in 2015 and the whole stuff with the arbitration that he went through, wanting to be paid like a wide receiver. He said that it never really was about that. It was more so that he just didn't want to be franchise tagged. That was a big thing for him. And rightfully so, because tight ends at that time weren't getting paid as much as he thought his value was. And I mean, he was a multiple Pro Bowler here. He kind of almost, it felt like he was one of those guys, athlete-wise, at that tight end position, was one of the best in the NFL, because it was really a wide receiver, in essence, playing like a tight end. So he wanted to kind of clear those things up. And when he said that, when the Saints made that trade, he was shocked. He did not see that trade coming and going to Seattle. But again, he was kind of like, all right, after a while of kind of processing, this is part of the business, as he mentioned, this is the big thing he learned, and he actually got a chance to play, go for a Super Bowl with Seattle and then with Green Bay, because there were two teams that could potentially win a Super Bowl. They didn't do it, but that was kind of one of those things where he's like, all right, I feel like now he's at a place where, all right, I've processed all that, I've got that behind me, and he repeatedly kept saying how much this place means. There's a special place here in New Orleans, and he's glad that he wanted to be back here to play pretty much his rest of his career here.
And before we get into the rest of practice, I think we undersold the fact that he got number 80 back. He told us to put on the threads and to have number 80 on truly meant something to him. He almost had a little moment when he was talking about it with us, even driving up to the facility. One thing that surprised me, given the trade and how it was a shock to him and it didn't sit well with him, he still spoke very highly of the front office here, the top to bottom organization. And he said, look, having been at other organizations, you realize just how good the Saints are top to bottom as far as their front office, how they operate, which to me says a lot about he's locked in. It's in the past for him. He was able to at least talk to the media and also making sure the fans know, hey, this is what happened. We've moved on from it. It's the 2023 Saints. I'm ready to be part of it.
Yeah, now the big question is, what is his role? How does he fit on this roster? And certainly you're looking at this tight end room, and I'm going, all right, Juwan Johnson and probably Foster Moore are the two guys that you're all right, I can pencil them as a starter. Then it's like, okay, does a Lucas Kroll step in? Do we see Jimmy Graham make the plays? I just still go back to what Dennis Allen said a couple of days ago, when it's like, all right, when you have these veterans in camp, what are you looking for? And Jimmy Graham, again, is a guy who took a year off. What do you want to see? And it's like, when you're as a veteran, I don't need to see it every day, but I need to see it at some point in camp. And Jimmy Graham's going to have the opportunity to show that he can be a viable player, not the 2013 Pro Bowl record, tight end, putting up all these kind of numbers, but at least be a serviceable tight end in this offense. And if he can show that during camp, then he'll find his way on this roster. But that's going to be the big question in training camp. How much did that year off affect him? Can he get back to at least playing and contributing to this team? And those are certainly the questions that we're going to solve during training camp. Let's talk about that training camp practice, day 4. Kind of what were your observations and thoughts of what you saw out there today?
Well, the one thing for me, if we're speaking about the offense still, is that Alvin Kamara was a part of the routes on air when the running backs were off to the side. So I'm liking that Derek Carr, and maybe, who knows, like, put Alvin with them on the routes on air, but I think it's more so Derek Carr wants to get the timing right with Alvin Kamara because he knows he's a well-rounded running back that can be a really good pass catcher in this offense. That was one thing that stood out to me. And again, it just very competitive practice.
Yeah.
It's day 4, and this heat, let me tell you guys, today's heat was the worst it's been in all 4 practices. I think maybe that's why Jimmy Graham actually did have a vets day, and Michael Thomas by design was worked in and out. It was so hot out there, and the fact that it was competitive through and through, I didn't see anything glaring that upset me as far as like drops or fumbles or things like that. We actually had to come inside a little bit earlier with media, so if we missed anything in that period, that's why. But to me, I didn't see anything that I thought, man, we're taking a step backward. It's continued to be stacking days forward.
Yeah, well, one thing that I've kind of seen this theme through these first 4 days, and at least in some of the individuals, some of the teams, some of the 7-on-7 stuff, they're really emphasizing getting their athletes, their best athletes out in space offensively. So I've seen Alvin Kamara run jet sweeps. I've seen him a lot involved in the passing game. I've seen Rashid Shaheed do the same kind of thing. I feel like, and we'll ask, and Dennis Allen, when he was talking about just kind of the stuff they've assessed, what they did last season, I think when they've gone back and kind of reviewed what they did offensively, I think they felt like they missed opportunities to get those playmakers the ball in certain situations in games. It seems early on in camp, they want to emphasize getting them in just different positions, even getting Taysom Hill kind of, you know, he's been taking quarterback reps the last couple of days, running that QB draw, running stuff out of there. There's going to be a chance where they're like, all right, we've got to get the ball in these guys' play, because we had such a stagnant offense at times during last year that I think now if you're working at this point, making an emphasis early to make sure that you can get your playmakers the ball in different types of situations, not just your typical handoff or typical 5-yard in and out or route. It's going to be beneficial moving down, and I think that's one thing that they want to do in this camp. Defensively, one guy that stood out today was Isaac Adam, and he had 2 good plays. There was one where there was a go route with Rashid Shaheed down the sideline, stayed with it, and again, Shaheed's a fast guy, but being able to stay with him and make a play on that was really good. And then he had another one on the sideline when Jameis Winston was at quarterback and he was kind of scrambling out. He made a good play on the sideline there. And Dennis Allen spoke about Isaac Adam, and just a guy who was playing special teams. He was picked up late last season, and a guy who's, you know, got the athletic build. He's long, he's lengthy. A guy that could probably be serviceable, at least making a special team roster. If not, you know, we'll see what he can do, you know, when he gets into these preseason games. But again, it is early on. It is only day 4. Anything else that you kind of wanted to, you know, kind of even talk about before we move on to this off day tomorrow, which is probably the Saints are welcoming?
Yes, it's definitely a good time to finally take a day off. Honestly, it's just seeing, again, the guys continue to sack days. You mentioned the plays of the day, so I don't need to go back over that. But yeah, no, it's just Derek Carr has looked really crisp. Jameis Winston has looked good. Jake Haener.
Yeah.
Come on now. The rookie quarterback has actually really impressed through 4 days of practice. The pads aren't on yet, though. That's when things change. And for me, that's what I'm looking forward to, is seeing Brian Brzee in full pads. How does he handle it? Peyton Turner is still a guy that needs, it's a make or break it year for him. We still need to see him. How does Trevor Penning look coming back from whatever the minor injury was with his foot the other day? He was back out there. He was actually back out there yesterday as well. So to see him continue to work in, Cesar Ruiz said he feels great. To me, it's when the pads come on, that's when we learn a lot.
Yeah, especially we're going to learn a lot in those trenches, because that's
and
when
one-on-ones, when are they coming?
And those are
the one-on-ones need to
and those are going to happen in pads, and we're probably going to definitely see that next week. Again, the Saints are going to take Sunday off, and then the first padded practice will be Monday. For Brooke Kirchhofer, I'm Ricardo LeCompte, recapping day 4 of Saints training camp.